Well, it's been a while, but I'm back with more Castlevania, and for today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at 3 games. About a year ago, I did a video on Castlevania The Adventure, and I really didn't think it was all that good. And it's often thought of as a low point in the series, but what if I told you that Iga, as fans have come to call him, thought the same and decided to do a remake of it? Yes, Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, a game that was made exclusively for the Wii's now defunct WiiWare shop. Yeah, so many exclusive games from that time that are gone forever because they never got a physical release. You wonder why I fear a digital-only future? So the Rebirth essentially retells the story of Christopher Belmont, one of the lesser-known Belmonts despite having a duology to his name. What can I say about the Adventure Rebirth? Well, it's 1,000 times better than the original version. While Adventure was its own beast, this game is much more of a traditional classicvania. Christopher can still upgrade his whip to shoot fire, and I find it's much easier to maintain it. There are only 6 stages in the game, which is definitely a step up from the original. It's not a complete remake of the original, more like a reimagining of the game. What I will say about the graphics, they definitely stand out with 2D sprites, but have 3D effects such as this bouncing eye boss. Stage 4 is a huge maze, and it took me quite a few tries to get through. One thing I love doing is making the chandeliers fall on the armored guys. Love using environmental hazards to my advantage. Especially comes in handy with this room. Gotta really use your attacks carefully. I really do love the music though. So gothic. My biggest problem with this stage is that it doesn't know how to end. Then you fight this guy who's bigger than the screen. Alright, come on! I almost got him! No! Eventually, after much tenseness, I managed to finally beat him down. Starting stage 5 is another long one, but the boss battle against Death is actually pretty easy. But now it's time to confront Dracula.
As ever, the ally of worthless humans.
The first form of Dracula is pretty standard. It's the final boss of Rondo of Blood Redux, because everybody remembers that from Symphony of the Night. Then he turns into another giant bat, which is reminiscent of the final boss in the original Castlevania. Well, it's easy enough, so it's time for the ending and... Oh great, he has a third form! And this form is probably the toughest Dracula form I've ever had to fight. Mostly because wearing down his health is so hard, and this wouldn't even be the worst part, but if you fail to defeat Dracula here, you gotta fight him from the beginning all over again. Why? After a montage of deaths, come on, yeah! So that's the Adventure Rebirth. It's a huge improvement over the original. I really should have added this on to the end of my original review, but the adventure would get a sequel on Game Boy just a short time later called Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge. That's not confusing at all. Well, let's see how Christopher's story continues. 15 years have passed since the adventure, and Christopher now has a son named Solyu. I think that's how you pronounce it. And proper training has begun to make Solyu the next vampire hunter. But Dracula makes his return and uses Solyu to become human again. Thus, Christopher sets out to rescue his son and put Dracula down once more. What does this game have that the original doesn't? Well, there's 4 stages and you can tackle them in any order. Kinda like Mega Man, there's no advantage to doing one stage before the others. What I will say about the gameplay is that this is a huge improvement over the original adventure. Christopher controls better, he's faster going up ropes, in fact he can now slide down the ropes to get through them faster. He has access to sub-weapons, and just overall this game flows better than the original game. There's still a challenge, but none of it feels cheap like in the original adventure. The final Dracula castle has so many levels to it. This is a really short game, all things considered. Not that Castlevania's ever been that long when you know what you're doing, but then there's this boss where you have a tight corridor to go through while fighting it. Just really tight design, but nothing like that compares to the boss fight against Christopher's son Solyu. He's supposedly a demon, but he doesn't look like a demon. What's so annoying is that he'll shoot knives at you while you have to move from platform to platform, which is hard to do when Belmonts walk with their typical walk. Once you finally beat him, Christopher sets his son free and finally confronts Dracula. Dracula has one attack. He basically stands on a platform and summons spheres to come out and hurt you. Like before, he's only vulnerable at the head, as per usual. No second form, which is very surprising. I guess Dracula didn't feel like going, "Behold my true form and despair!" So father and son are reunited and it's a happy ending, which brings Christopher Belmont's saga to a triumphant end. So Belmont's Revenge is a huge improvement over the original adventure. It basically took everything that didn't work and made it better. For a Game Boy game, it holds up remarkably well. Sure, some of the music is a bit crunchy due to being on a Game Boy, but it doesn't matter. Belmont's Revenge is worthy of the Castlevania name. But we got one more game to cover. Well, technically two. The first here is Kid Dracula for both the Famicom and the Game Boy. So Kid Dracula is not technically part of the Castlevania series, it's actually a parody of it. The story goes that Dracula's son Kid Dracula is woken up from a nap by Galamoths, so Kid Dracula goes out to basically accept his challenge. Really no story there, just a simple let's do this. This game was never released in the US, until Konami put it on as part of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, which is how I played the game. This is probably the closest we'll get to being able to play as Dracula in a mainland Castlevania. I mean, I guess he counts. The art style is what some would call cutesy. Kid Dracula has to fight things that look pretty nice, like witches that look like Wendy from Casper. All the monsters look cute and friendly, which is a nice little inverse from the usual Castlevania formula. Like, I'm fighting a rooster as my first boss, that tells you everything. Hearts are your life instead of being ammunition like they are in usual Castlevania. I will say that the game is not without its fair share of challenge, but Kid Dracula gradually gets more powerful as the game goes on. His main attack allows him to shoot from 3 directions, which you can charge up. My personal favorite is the Spread Fireball, which sends out 5 fireballs that can lock onto enemies. The Explosion Fireball, which is like the big fireball, except it leaves a blast radius that enemies can get caught up in. The Bat Transformation, which is like what Alucard would do in Castlevania 3, allows you to fly over pits that you don't want to jump over. And finally, there's the Upside Down move, which is needed for certain areas. The minigames to get extra lives they're confusing. Admittingly, that's because I didn't take the time to understand how they work, but oh well. The game is very wacky. Yeah, I had a quiz show against the Statue of Liberty. That kind of game. Eventually, when I finally reached Galamoth, he's actually really easy. You just stand under him and hit him whenever his mouth is open. So the ending talks about how Dracula became the Dark Lord once again. And this apparently sets off Castlevania Judgment years into the future. Gotta love Ega. Kid Dracula is a fine little romp, not much to it. It did receive a pseudo-sequel for the Game Boy. While the plot treats it as a sequel, it's really more of a polished port of the original than anything else. Unfortunately, I was unable to get a copy of this game, a little out of my price range, so I had to use an emulator. There are some minor differences, such as the layout of the levels, to accommodate for the Game Boy's smaller screen, but I was able to cheese the extra lives minigames. I never ran out of lives. Turns out Kid Dracula forgot his abilities, so he has to relearn them, which is pretty typical for a video game. It does add this umbrella that you can use to block attacks. I guess it's useful. I really don't have much to say about it, it's just a little distraction that you can play for a couple of hours. So that's it for today. Overall, these games are worthy of the Castlevania name. A shame some of them you can't buy today. Special thanks again to Sabrina from Super Gaming Brothers for editing this video. Check out her other work. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, which are provided in the description below. See you next time.